Okay, let's jump right into this explainer, where we're going to explore how Muhammad Ali Pasha took Egypt, which was, frankly, a fractured, chaotic province at the time, and transformed it into a centralized, modern powerhouse. I mean, think about what it actually takes to build a highly functional state practically from scratch. It takes vision, sure, but more than that, it requires a well-oiled machine. And today, we're going to look at the three interdependent gears that made up his machine: iron, wealth, and knowledge.
Now, there is a really fascinating insight here from the author. Muhammad Ali saw Egypt as much more than just a piece of territory to rule over. He saw it as the engine to revive a struggling empire. You see, when he arrived, the broader Ottoman world was facing some really severe threats from European powers, not to mention internal decay. He didn't just want to be another local governor. He wanted to create a resilient, modern base of power that could literally stand toe-to-toe with the rapidly industrializing West.
Drawing directly from chapters 5 and 6 of Shafiq Gorbel's definitive text, Muhammad Ali the Great, we are going to unpack the mechanics behind this massive historical paradigm shift. Gorbel lays out exactly how this transformation wasn't just some stroke of luck. It was a highly calculated, sometimes ruthless, and deeply methodical process.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with building a modern state, dive into knowledge and creating the elite, explore wealth through agriculture and industry, look at iron and the National Army, and finally, wrap up with the legacy of the project.
First up, building a modern state, moving from chaos to absolute centralization.
To really appreciate his achievements, we first have to understand the utter chaos of the system he completely upended. Before Muhammad Ali, Egypt was essentially run by competing factions. We're talking about the Mamluks and these independent tax farmers who basically treated their local regions like personal piggy banks. He systematically dismantled those old localized power structures. Muhammad Ali knew, for a fact, that a modern state simply cannot exist if its power is fragmented. He needed absolute centralized authority. Every single resource and every ounce of power had to flow directly back to the central government. Without that first crucial step, the rest of his machine never even gets built.
Which brings us to our second section: knowledge, creating the elite, the true engineers of the state. Let's look at how he engineered this brand new administrative and military leadership class. Because to run a centralized state, you need highly capable people whose absolute loyalty is to that state. He referred to this elite group as Al-Safwa. And the most crucial point here is that he gathered this Al-Safwa from incredibly diverse backgrounds. He didn't just rely on one tribe or one social class. By pulling in Mamluk youth, recruits from Sudan, immigrants from Europe and the Ottoman Empire, right alongside native Egyptians, he shattered traditional tribal molds. By raising and educating them together under the umbrella of the government, he ensured their loyalty was to the state alone, not to some local warlord or ethnic faction.
This really brilliantly illustrates his methodical approach. He was fully aware of the massive knowledge gap between Egypt and Europe, so he tackled it from three angles at once. First, he sent educational missions of bright young students directly to places like Paris to learn European administration and science firsthand. Second, rather than just relying on foreign institutions, he built specialized local academies right back in Egypt. And third, he sponsored huge efforts to translate Western sciences into languages his people could actually understand. He was literally importing the blueprint for modernity.
Moving on to our third section: wealth, agriculture and industry monopolies, the fuel for the state.
While knowledge provided the software of the state, so to speak, Muhammad Ali knew that to fuel this vast physical machine, he desperately needed our second pillar: wealth. And it is a stark contrast. The old system was stagnant, fragmented, and controlled by the multazim, corrupt tax farmers who squeezed the peasantry dry and kept the profits for themselves. But his new system, he abolished the multazim entirely. In its place, he instituted a massive state monopoly, known as al-Ishtikar, taking direct control over all production and trade. Practically overnight, the state became the sole landlord, the sole merchant, and the sole exporter. By taking that direct control of the land, he could dictate exactly what got planted. And what did he choose? Highly lucrative export crops, most notably the famous Egyptian long staple cotton. To support this massive agricultural pivot, he completely overhauled the infrastructure. He ordered the digging of large-scale, deep irrigation canals to make sure water reached the crops year-round. He essentially turned Egyptian agriculture from a localized survival mechanism into this massive, highly profitable state-funding engine.
But he definitely didn't stop at farming. What do you actually do with all that newly centralized wealth? Well, he funneled those unprecedented profits straight into kickstarting state-run industries. He bought modern machinery, established factories, and perhaps most impressively of all, he funded the construction of a powerful, modern naval fleet right in the shipyards of Alexandria. This wealth was finally giving Egypt a physical, formidable presence that it hadn't enjoyed in centuries.
That leads us directly to Section 4, Iron, the modern national army, the machinery of power.
All of this immense wealth and that newly trained elite were specifically generated to fund and manage the final protective machinery of the modern state. But he faced a massive dilemma, one that had plagued previous rulers in Egypt and all across the Ottoman world. For centuries, military power had relied on rebellious, unpredictable mercenary bands, kind of like the Albanian irregulars he himself originally arrived with. So how could he possibly secure his ambitious, long-term state-building project if his army might mutiny the second they weren't paid or just decide to seize power for themselves?
His revolutionary, though undeniably harsh, answer was general conscription, or al-tajnid al-am. This was a truly radical shift. Instead of importing foreign mercenaries, he shifted the military burden directly onto the native Egyptian peasantry. By drafting the local population, he forged a massive, disciplined national army. Now, it was a grueling, incredibly difficult transition for the people, for sure. But it gave the state a reliable, uniform military force that simply didn't exist before.
Of course, an army of conscripted peasants needs leaders. To lead these new troops, he connected our first pillar, knowledge, with our third pillar, iron. He established dedicated military academies right in Egypt. He utilized European expertise, literally hiring foreign officers, to train his newly formed, diverse elite into a highly professional, modern Egyptian officer corps. These guys weren't just warriors anymore. They were highly trained tacticians and engineers.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, the legacy of the modern project and its enduring impact.
So, we've seen all these gears turning perfectly together. Knowledge organized the wealth, wealth funded the iron, and iron protected the state. It naturally begs the ultimate question: did this relentless drive to centralize and modernize actually achieve its grandest imperial goals? Did he successfully resurrect the Ottoman world and create an unstoppable global power?
Well, the answer is actually quite nuanced. While international forces, namely the European powers who were terrified of his growing strength, eventually stepped in and curtailed his wider military and imperial ambitions, the project itself wasn't a total failure. Far from it, actually. His tripartite engine of iron, wealth, and knowledge exacted a heavy toll in terms of human labor and sacrifice, absolutely, but it permanently forged the bedrock of the modern Egyptian state. He took a fragmented, stagnant province and transformed it into a centralized, modern entity with its own army, its own economy, and its own educated elite. And it leaves us with a really fascinating thought to ponder. Can true modernization ever actually happen without immense centralized force, and what is the ultimate price a nation pays to step onto the modern world stage? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.